Have you ever wondered why some people come into your life, only to leave just when you thought they were meant to stay? Have you ever felt the sting of losing someone who was once an important part of your journey? It can feel confusing, even painful, to watch relationships change and people walk away. But let me tell you something. God does not make mistakes. When He removes someone from your life, it is for a divine reason. Sometimes He takes people away not to hurt you, but to bless you. You may not see it now, but in time you will understand. You will look back and realize that the people who left were not meant to be part of the next chapter of your journey. And if you hold on to God, if you trust His plan, you will see that He always replaces what He removes with something far greater than you could ever imagine. God sees the things you do not see. He hears the conversations you never hear. He knows the hearts of those around you in ways you never can. And sometimes the people you think are meant to be in your life are actually holding you back. Maybe they are keeping you from growing in your faith. Maybe they are leading you down a path that is not aligned with God's purpose for you. Maybe their influence is keeping you stuck in patterns that are not good for your soul. So when God removes them, it is not rejection. It is protection. It is His way of shielding you from something you cannot yet comprehend. He loves you too much to let you settle for less than His best. Oh! And so even when it hurts, even when you do not understand, you must trust that His ways are higher, His wisdom is greater, and His plan is perfect. When you feel the loss of someone who has walked away, take a moment to reflect. Instead of asking, why did this happen? Ask God, what are you trying to teach me? Because every time God removes someone, He is also making room for something new. Maybe He is preparing you for a relationship that will strengthen your faith instead of weakening it. Maybe He is making space for opportunities that would never come if you were still holding on to what was. Maybe He is stretching your faith, calling you to depend on Him more than you depend on the people around you. Sometimes we rely too much on others when we should be leaning on God. And in His love, He gently takes away the distractions so that we can fix our eyes on Him. Because no person, no matter how wonderful, should take the place of God in your life. But let's be honest. It is not always easy to let go. It is hard when friendships fade, when love turns cold, when people change, and when goodbyes come unexpectedly. Your heart may ache, your mind may race with questions, and your spirit may feel heavy with doubt. But let me remind you, God is still in control. He is not surprised by the people who leave your life. He is not caught off guard when relationships end. He is not shaken by the changes that seem to turn your world upside down. Because He already saw it coming. And He already has a plan to turn your pain into purpose. What you see as loss, He sees as preparation. What you see as rejection, He sees as redirection. What you see as an ending, He sees as the beginning of something better. Think back on your life. How many times have you lost someone, only to realize later that their absence was a blessing in disguise? Oh, how many times have you cried over someone, only to wake up one day and thank God that they are no longer part of your story? You see, what feels like heartbreak today may turn into your greatest testimony tomorrow. Oh, when you trust God, when you surrender your relationships to Him, He will not only heal your wounds, but also lead you to the people who are meant to walk with you in the next season of your life. God's plan is always bigger than what you can see. He is working behind the scenes, rearranging your life, setting things in motion, and positioning the right people at the right time. But here is the key. You have to trust Him. You have to believe that He knows what is best for you. You have to stop chasing after people who have left and start focusing on the one who never will. Because people may come and go, but God remains the same. His love is constant, His presence is unshakable, and His purpose for your life is unstoppable. So when He removes someone, do not cling to what He is trying to take away. Do not fight to hold on to something that He is calling you to release. Instead, open your hands, open your heart, and let God do what He does best. Lead you to something greater. In moments of loss, draw closer to God. Let Him fill the spaces left behind. Let Him heal the wounds that people could not. Let Him restore your faith, renew your strength, and remind you that you are never alone. Because when people walk away, God walks in. When others abandon you, He embraces you. When relationships fade, His love remains. So trust His process, trust His timing, and trust that He knows exactly what He is doing. Even when you do not understand it, even when you cannot see the full picture, believe that His plan is unfolding exactly as it should. And one day you will look back and realize that every person who left was not a loss but a lesson. Every goodbye was not a heartbreak but a breakthrough. And every removal was not a punishment but a preparation for something far greater. Keep your faith, keep your trust, and watch how God turns your pain into purpose. When God removes someone from your life, it is not by accident. It is by divine design. Often we struggle with letting go because we do not see the bigger picture. We hold on to relationships that have expired, friendships that have become toxic, and connections that no longer align with our purpose. But God, in His infinite wisdom, sees what we cannot. He knows the hearts of people, their intentions, their future decisions, and how they will impact our destiny. And when He removes someone, it is because He is protecting you, preparing you, or positioning you for something greater. It may hurt in the moment, but trust that God's plan is always for your good. He knows the burdens you are carrying, the distractions that are pulling you away from Him, and the people who are preventing you from stepping into the calling He has for your life. Sometimes we mistake comfort for purpose. We stay in relationships simply because they are familiar, even if they are not fruitful. We allow people to stay in our lives out of obligation rather than alignment. But God is not a God of stagnation. He is a God of movement, of growth, of transformation. When He sees that a relationship is no longer serving His plan for your life, He will remove it, not to punish you, but to prepare you. Because every closed door, every ended friendship, and every unexpected goodbye is a setup for something better. It may not feel like it now, but one day you will look back and see how God was strategically removing people so He could elevate you to a place where only the right people could go with you. God also removes people to teach us dependency on Him. Sometimes we rely too much on others for our happiness, our validation, and even our faith. We put people in positions that only God should hold in our hearts, and when that happens, God will step in and remove the distraction so we can refocus on Him. He wants to be your source of strength, your provider, your guide. And if someone is standing in the way of that relationship, He will remove them. Not to harm you, but to heal you. Because God knows that no person can fill the void that only He can satisfy. You may be wondering, why now? Why did this person leave at this moment? But God's timing is never random. He knows when you are ready to grow, when you need to be stretched, and when you need to step into a new season. And sometimes that requires separation. What you see as rejection is often divine redirection. What you see as loss is actually gain in the kingdom of God. Because every time God removes someone, He replaces them with something greater, greater peace, greater purpose, greater alignment with His will. So instead of asking, why did they leave? Ask God, what are you making room for in my life? Because every removal is an opportunity for renewal, is an opportunity for renewal. God is pruning your life, cutting away what is not fruitful so that you can bear even greater fruit. And though the process is painful, the outcome is always worth it. God never removes without replacing, never subtracts without adding, never takes away without giving something even better in return. Trust His plan even when it does not make sense, because one day you will see why that person had to go, and you will thank God for the blessing of their removal. When God removes someone from your life, it is often a sign that He is leading you towards something greater. But in the moment, it may feel like a loss, a deep wound that you do not understand. You may ask, why did this happen? What did I do wrong? Could I have changed the outcome? But God does not make mistakes. He does not remove people without a purpose. Every person who exits your life was either a lesson, a stepping stone, or a distraction that He needed to clear away. And while it may hurt, you must trust that God's hands are always at work, shaping your path according to His perfect plan. Sometimes God removes people because they were only meant to be in your life for a season. Not everyone is meant to walk with you forever. There are friendships and relationships that serve a purpose in one chapter but have no place in the next. It does not mean those relationships were meaningless. It simply means their role in your story has ended. But here's where we struggle. We try to hold on when God is telling us to let go. We try to revive connections that God has already declared dead, and in doing so, we delay our own growth. We must learn to release with faith, believing that God knows what He is doing. If He allowed someone to leave, it means their purpose in your life has been fulfilled. Other times, God removes people because they are preventing you from stepping into your destiny. There are relationships that keep you stuck, that drain your energy, that pull you away from the presence of God rather than push you toward Him. It could be a toxic friendship, an unhealthy relationship, or a connection that is rooted in sin. And because God loves you too much to let you stay in a place that is not good for you, He will remove what is hindering your spiritual growth. He will close doors that you are too afraid to close yourself. And while you may not understand it now, one day you will look back and realize that what you thought was a loss was actually your greatest blessing. God's removals are always for your protection. He sees what you cannot see. He knows the hearts of people, their intentions, their hidden motives. There are people in your life right now who may smile in your face but secretly root for your downfall. There are connections that seem harmless but are actually leading you away from your calling. And because God is a loving Father, He will not allow you to be surrounded by those who will harm your destiny. He will intervene, even if it breaks your heart, because He knows what is best for you. And then there are times when God removes people to make space for new blessings. You may be crying over a lost relationship, not realizing that God is preparing to bring someone into your life who will love, support, and encourage you in ways you never imagined. You may be mourning the end of a friendship, not knowing that God is aligning you with people who will push you toward greatness. Sometimes we cling so tightly to the wrong people that we miss out on the right ones. But God in His wisdom knows when it is time for change. He is making room. He is shifting things in your favor. But you must be willing to trust Him, to surrender, to believe that His plans are far greater than anything you could have planned for yourself. So if God has removed someone from your life, do not resist it. Do not fight to hold on to what He is trying to take away. Instead, surrender. Let go with faith, knowing that His ways are higher than your ways. Because when you release what was never meant to stay, you open your hands to receive what was always meant to be. And in that place of surrender, you will find peace, purpose, and the assurance that God's plan for your life is unfolding exactly as it should. Letting go is one of the hardest things we are asked to do. As humans, we form attachments. We invest time, energy, love, and emotions into relationships, and when those relationships come to an unexpected end, it can feel like a part of us has been ripped away. But the truth is, nothing happens outside of God's will. If He has removed someone from your life, He has done so with intention, with a greater purpose that you may not yet see. This is where faith must take the lead. Faith to believe that God is orchestrating every detail, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. One of the reasons God removes people is because He is protecting you from something unseen. You may not realize it now, but there are situations, conversations, and even betrayals that God has shielded you from. Have you ever looked back and thought, I never saw that person's true colors until after they left? That is not coincidence. That is divine revelation. God sees beyond the surface. He knows the thoughts and intentions of every heart, even when they are hidden from you. And in His love, He removes those who were never meant to go where He is leading you. We often struggle to accept this because we focus on what we lost instead of what God is doing. The pain of separation can cloud our understanding, making us question God's goodness. Why would He take away someone I cared about? But what if God was rescuing you? What if He saw that relationship leading you down a path that would have derailed your purpose? What if He knew that holding on to that person would only bring you more pain in the future? God does not just respond to what is happening now. He moves based on what He knows is coming. And sometimes He removes people not because they are bad, but because they are not part of your future. Another reason God removes people is to test your dependence on Him. It is easy to lean on people for emotional support, for encouragement, for validation. But when we begin to rely on them more than we rely on God, He will allow a separation to take place. He is a jealous God, and He wants to be your first source of strength. Have you ever been in a season where you felt alone, where the people you once counted on were suddenly absent? That is not an accident. That is a divine setup for you to grow closer to God. Because when people leave, you are left with only Him. And it is in those moments that you truly begin to see His hand, to hear His voice, to experience His comfort in ways you never have before. God's goal is always your spiritual growth. He will remove distractions, even if those distractions come in the form of relationships. Some people pull you away from your calling, not because they intend to, but simply because their presence keeps you in a place of complacency. Maybe you had a friendship that was fun, comfortable, easy, but it never challenged you to grow in faith. Maybe you were in a relationship that gave you temporary happiness, but deep down, you knew it was not pushing you toward God's will. When God sees you settling for less than what He has planned, He will intervene. He will allow certain connections to fade, certain doors to close, certain people to walk away. And though it may not make sense now, you will later see that it was necessary. But here is the key. Do not keep reopening doors that God has closed. Too often we try to force relationships to continue when God has already made it clear that they need to end. We send the text, make the call, beg for another chance, all because we are afraid to be alone. But when you keep chasing after what God has removed, you delay your own healing. Here you go. You prolong the lesson He is trying to teach you, and sometimes you even block the new blessings He is trying to bring into your life. Trust that if God removed them, He has a reason. Trust that His plan is greater. So instead of asking, why did they leave? Ask, God, what are you making room for? Instead of mourning what was, start preparing for what is to come. Because God never takes away without the intention to give something greater. He is setting you up for something beautiful, but you must be willing to trust Him through the process. Let go, surrender, and believe that what He has in store for you will far outweigh anything you thought you lost. There is a pain that comes with loss, an ache that settles deep in the soul when someone we once held close is no longer a part of our lives. It feels like a void, a gap in our hearts that nothing seems to fill. And in that pain we ask, why did this happen? Why did God allow this person to leave? But what if we have been looking at it the wrong way? What if instead of seeing their absence as a loss, we saw it as part of God's plan to make room for something greater? Because God is not only the giver of good things, He is also the taker of things that no longer serve His purpose for your life. And when He removes someone, it is not to punish you, but to prepare you. One of the greatest struggles we face is learning to trust God when we do not understand His ways. We quote scriptures about His plan being good, but when that plan involves losing someone we love, it becomes harder to believe. It's a gunda. But the truth remains, God sees what we cannot. He knows what is ahead. And sometimes, in His mercy, He removes people before they can hurt us more deeply. Have you ever thought that maybe God was saving you from a heartbreak that was yet to come? Maybe He saw something in that person's heart that you could not. Maybe He knew they would change, that they would betray you, that their presence would lead you further from Him rather than closer. God does not just act in the moment. He moves according to eternity. And if He took them away, then there is something about their presence that would have harmed your future. But it is not always about harm. Sometimes God removes people simply because their season in your life has ended. Not everyone is meant to stay forever. Some people come into our lives for a purpose, and when that purpose is fulfilled, God moves them out of the way. Think about it. Have you ever had a friendship that was exactly what you needed at a certain time? Maybe they were there to help you through a hard season, to encourage you, to pray for you. But over time, things changed. Conversations grew distant. The connection faded. And suddenly, they were gone. That is not a mistake. That is divine alignment. God brought them for a reason, but He never intended for them to be permanent. And when we try to hold on to people longer than we should, we create unnecessary pain for ourselves. One of the biggest mistakes we make is confusing comfort with calling. Just because a relationship is familiar does not mean it is God's will for your future. And sometimes we settle for relationships that feel safe, even when God is calling us to something higher. This is why He removes people, not because they are bad, but because they cannot go where He is taking you. Think about Abraham. When God called him into his destiny, He told him to leave everything behind. His home, his family, everything he knew. And only after he obeyed did God reveal the full blessing. Some of us are holding on to people who are preventing us from stepping into our promised land. And until we let them go, we cannot receive the fullness of what God has in store. But here is the challenge. When God removes someone, we must resist the urge to go back. It is human nature to want to reopen closed doors. We miss the comfort, the companionship, the familiarity. And in that longing, we sometimes try to revive what God has already buried. But when you keep going back to what God has ended, you block your own growth. You delay your own blessings. You stay in a cycle of pain that God has already freed you from. That is why it is so important to trust the separation. Trust that if God took them away, it was for your good. Trust that He is making room for something better. And what is that better? Sometimes it is not another person, it is a deeper relationship with Him. Because often, God removes people to draw us closer to Him. He takes away what we depended on, so that we learn to depend on Him instead. Have you ever noticed that some of your strongest moments of faith came when you had no one else to turn to? That is not an accident. God will allow seasons of isolation so that you can hear His voice more clearly. Because when the distractions are gone, when the noise is silenced, that is when you truly begin to see who God is. So if you are in a season where you have lost someone important, do not let bitterness take root. Do not waste time questioning why they left. Instead, ask God, what are you doing in my life? What are you making room for? What do you want to teach me in this season? Because when you shift your focus from what was to what is coming, you will begin to see that God's hand has been guiding you all along. Let go of the past. Trust in His plan. And know that what He is preparing for you will always be greater than what He took away. There is something painful about losing people we once thought would be in our lives forever. Whether it is a friend who suddenly grows distant, a relationship that ends without explanation, or even a family member who turns away, the absence leaves a void. And in that emptiness, we begin to question, why did this happen? Was it something we did? Could we have done more? But here is the truth. When God removes someone from your life, it is never by accident. It is intentional. It is part of His divine plan, even when we do not understand it in the moment. And more often than not, His removal is a sign of His protection, not His punishment. God sees what we cannot see. He knows the heart in a way that we never will. We look at people on the surface, the way they treat us, the way they speak, the memories we have built with them. But God sees beyond that. He sees their true character, their future actions, their hidden intentions. He sees the conversations they have when we are not around. He knows whether their presence will bless us or break us. And when He sees that someone will ultimately bring harm, He intervenes. Have you ever thought that maybe that rejection you felt was actually God's way of saving you? That maybe the pain of separation today is far less than the pain of what they would have done tomorrow. God is not just working for your present comfort, He is working for your future protection. But even knowing this, it is hard to let go. Our hearts crave answers. We want closure. We want explanations that make sense. And when we do not get them, we hold on to the past, replaying moments in our minds, wondering if things could have been different. But God does not always give us the answers we seek. Instead, He gives us an opportunity to trust Him. To believe that if He took someone away, there was a reason. To accept that even if we do not see the full picture, He is painting something beautiful. Faith is not about understanding. It is about surrender. It is about saying, God, I don't know why this happened, but I trust that You do. I trust that Your ways are higher than mine. And I trust that whatever you remove, You will replace with something better. There is also another side to this. Sometimes God removes people not because they were harming us, but because we were not ready for them. Sometimes we are the ones who need to grow, to mature, to heal. There are moments when God separates us from people so that He can work on us. Because if He had allowed them to stay, we might have become too dependent on them instead of Him. He wants us to stand on His promises, not on human relationships. Oh, wow. He wants us to find our identity in Him, not in who is by our side. And until we learn to fully rely on Him, He will continue to remove distractions, even people we love. Think about the story of Joseph. He was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and imprisoned for years. To him, it must have felt like God had abandoned him. But in reality, God was setting him up for something greater. The people who turned against him were actually pushing him toward his destiny. And years later, when Joseph became ruler of Egypt, he was able to look back and see that everything, even the betrayals, had a purpose. That is what happens when we trust God's plan. The losses we cry over today will make sense when we see where He is taking us. So what do you do when God removes someone? You let them go. You do not chase after what God has already taken away. You do not try to reopen doors that He has closed. You do not beg people to stay when God has already led them out. Instead, you trust, you surrender, and you focus on what is ahead, not on what is behind. Because the moment you stop looking back, you will begin to see what God is bringing into your future. And here is the beautiful part. When God removes someone, He always replaces them with something better. Maybe it is a new friendship that encourages you in your faith. Maybe it is a mentor who will guide you toward your calling. Maybe it is a season of solitude where you grow closer to Him. Whatever it is, know this: God never takes without giving. He never removes without replacing. And whatever He is preparing for you will always be far greater than what you lost. So if you are in a season of loss, if you are feeling the pain of someone's absence, take heart. God is not done with your story. He is still writing it, and every chapter He writes is leading you to a greater purpose. Let go of what was, trust in what is coming, and believe that the best is yet to come. There are moments in life when the loss of a person feels unbearable. You replay conversations in your mind, you wonder what went wrong, and you struggle to understand why someone you cared about is no longer a part of your journey. It feels like a void has been left, an emptiness that refuses to be filled. But what if I told you that this very loss is God's way of making room for something greater? What if the pain you feel today is actually the groundwork for a blessing that you could never have imagined? Because when God removes someone, He does not do it to hurt you. He does it to prepare you for something better. And the sooner you embrace this truth, the sooner you will walk in the fullness of what He has planned for you. God is strategic. Nothing He does is random. He does not take people out of your life without reason. Sometimes He removes them because they have already served their purpose. Think about the seasons of your life. The people you were close to 5 years ago may not be the same people you are close to today. And that is not because something went wrong. It is because you outgrew that season. Just like a tree sheds its leaves in the fall, God prunes our relationship so that we can grow into who He has called us to be. Some people are meant to be with us for a chapter, not the entire story. And holding on to them when God is trying to remove them only delays our growth. But even when we understand this, letting go is not easy. The human heart resists change. We crave familiarity. We want the comfort of what we know, even if what we know is not what is best for us. This is why trust is so important. Trusting God means believing that even when something does not make sense now, it will make sense later. It means surrendering our need for control and accepting that God sees the bigger picture. You may not understand today why someone walked away, why a friendship dissolved, why a relationship ended, but one day you will look back and realize that it was all part of God's divine plan. The loss you feel now is making space for something greater. And here is another truth. Sometimes God removes people because they are keeping us from Him. There are relationships that pull us away from God instead of drawing us closer. It might not even be obvious, it could be subtle. Maybe they influence your thoughts, your decisions, your priorities in ways that you do not even realize. But God sees it. And because He loves you too much to let you drift away from Him, He will remove whatever is causing the distance. Sometimes the very thing we are holding on to is the thing that is holding us back from a deeper relationship with Him. And because He is a loving Father, He will do whatever it takes to bring you back to Him, even if it means removing someone you love. This is why prayer is so important in times of loss. Instead of asking, "Why, God?" we should be asking, "What now, God?" Instead of dwelling on the pain of someone's absence, we should be seeking God's presence even more. Because in the absence of people, we often find the presence of God in a way we never have before. Think about Jesus in the wilderness. Before He stepped into His greatest calling, He was led into a season of solitude. He was alone, but He was not abandoned. God was with Him, preparing Him for what was ahead. And maybe, just maybe, the absence you are experiencing right now is actually an invitation to draw closer to God. One of the greatest mistakes we can make is trying to force what God has already ended. trying to reopen doors he has closed, trying to keep people in our lives when he has already removed them. The danger in this is that we may end up holding on to something that is no longer meant for us. Think about Lot's wife. When God was leading her to something new, she looked back. And in that moment, she became stuck. She could not move forward because she was too attached to what was behind her. Do not make that mistake. Do not look back when God is calling you forward. Do not chase after what he has already taken away, because what he has ahead of you is far greater than anything he has removed. And here is the good news. When God takes something away, he always has a plan for restoration. You may not see it now, but he is working behind the scenes, preparing something even better. Maybe he is leading you to new friendships that will encourage you in your faith. Maybe he is preparing a relationship that will align with his purpose for your life. Maybe he is setting you apart for a season of growth, so that when the right people do come, you will be ready to receive them. Whatever it is, know that God's plans are always for your good. He never removes without replacing. He never takes away without giving something better in return. So today, if you are struggling with the loss of someone in your life, if you feel the weight of their absence, take heart. God has not abandoned you. He is not punishing you. He is preparing you. He is positioning you. And in time, you will see why everything had to happen the way it did. The people who left were not meant to stay. The doors that closed were not meant to remain open. And the pain you feel now will one day be the testimony of how God's plan was far greater than anything you could have imagined. Hold on to that truth. Walk in faith. And trust that what is coming is better than what has been. There comes a point in life where you must accept that some people were never meant to stay. No matter how much you wanted them to, no matter how much history you shared, their role in your life was only temporary. It does not mean the connection was meaningless. It does not mean the memories were wasted. It simply means that God had a purpose for them in your life for a season. And when that purpose was fulfilled, he moved them out of the way. And if you are struggling with that truth, if your heart is aching over someone who walked away, then I want to remind you of something. God's plan is always better than your preference. Often we hold on to people because we are afraid of being alone. We cling to relationships that are no longer serving us because we fear the unknown. But what if God is removing them to make room for something greater? What if he is preparing you for something you cannot yet see? Too often we mistake the removal of people as rejection when it is actually divine redirection. God is shifting your path, realigning your steps, and protecting you from what you do not even know is coming. The people who leave are not accidents. They are not mistakes. They are part of the process. And instead of questioning why they are gone, you must trust that their absence is making space for something far greater than you could ever imagine. When we try to force people to stay, we are actually resisting God's plan. We are trying to build a future with people who were never meant to be a part of it. And when we do that, we limit what God wants to do in our lives. Imagine holding onto a small broken toy when God is trying to give you something brand new. You refuse to let go, thinking that this little thing is all you will ever have. But if you would just release your grip, you would see that what God has for you is so much greater. That is exactly what happens when you try to keep people in your life that God has removed. You are clinging to something broken, something temporary, when God is preparing you for something far more meaningful, far more aligned with his purpose for you. And here is another truth. Some people are only meant to be lessons, not lifelong companions. God allows certain people into your life to teach you, to shape you, to help you grow. But that does not mean they are meant to stay forever. Some people are there to help you learn patience. Some are there to teach you self-worth. Some are there to strengthen your faith. And once their role is fulfilled, God moves them on. Not because they were bad, not because you were wrong, but because their season in your life has ended. And if you try to hold on to them past their expiration date, you will only bring yourself unnecessary pain. It is painful to lose people, but sometimes that pain is necessary for your spiritual growth. Have you ever noticed that the most significant changes in your life happen after a season of loss? When you are stripped of everything familiar, when the people you relied on are suddenly gone, he becomes your comfort. He becomes your refuge. He becomes your source of strength. And maybe that is exactly why he allowed certain people to leave, so that you would learn to depend on him fully without distraction. Another reason God removes people is to protect your destiny. Some relationships, no matter how much you love them, are simply not meant to go where God is taking you. They may seem good on the surface, but underneath, they are holding you back. Maybe they are distracting you from your purpose. Maybe they are influencing you in ways you do not even realize. Maybe they are leading you away from God instead of closer to Him. And because God sees what you do not, He steps in and removes them, not to punish you, but to preserve you. He is protecting you from what you cannot see. He is making sure that nothing and no one interferes with the calling He has placed on your life. If you are still holding on to someone who is no longer in your life, I want you to ask yourself this. Are you trusting God or are you trusting your emotions? Faith requires surrender. It requires letting go, even when you do not understand why. It requires believing that if God took something away, He will replace it with something better. That does not mean the process will be easy. It does not mean you will not feel the sting of loss. But it does mean that if you keep moving forward, if you keep trusting, if you keep believing one day, you will look back and realize that what felt like loss was actually gain. God does not take without giving. He does not remove without replacing. He does not close doors without opening new ones. And if He has taken someone out of your life, it is because He has something better in store. Maybe it is a new friendship that will encourage you in ways you never expected. Maybe it is a relationship that will align with His purpose for your life. Maybe it is a season of solitude where He will reveal Himself to you in ways you never imagined. Whatever it is, trust that His plans are far greater than your own. Today, I challenge you to release whatever you have been holding on to. Stop questioning. Stop doubting. Stop resisting. Let go of what was so that you can step into what will be. Trust that God knows exactly what He is doing. Trust that He is working all things together for your good. And most importantly, trust that the people who left were not meant to stay. Their chapter in your story has ended, but your story is far from over. And the best part, the next chapter, the one God is writing, is going to be greater than anything you ever imagined. So have faith, keep moving forward, and know that God's plan is always perfect, even when you do not understand it. One of the hardest things to accept in life is that some people are only meant to be with us for a season. We invest our time, our emotions, and our hearts into relationships, expecting them to last forever, only to find that God has a different plan. When someone walks away, or when God removes them from your life, it is easy to feel abandoned, rejected, and confused. What did I do wrong? But the truth is, it is not always about what you did or did not do. Sometimes it is simply God's way of redirecting your life toward His greater purpose. When God removes someone, He is often protecting you from something you cannot see. Maybe they were leading you down the wrong path. Maybe they were keeping you from fully stepping into your calling. Maybe their presence was creating more harm than good, even if you did not realize it at the time. God's vision extends beyond what our human eyes can see. He knows the dangers ahead, the struggles, the betrayals, the distractions. And because He loves you, He steps in and removes whatever, or whoever, could stand in the way of His perfect plan for you. Think about the times in your life when you held on to someone longer than you should have. Maybe you knew deep down that the relationship was not good for you, but you ignored the signs. Maybe God gave you warning after warning, yet you resisted. The longer we hold on to people God has removed, the more pain we cause ourselves. Because when we try to force something that is not meant to be, we are fighting against God's will instead of trusting it. And that never leads to peace. It only leads to more heartache, more disappointment, and more frustration. But here is the beautiful truth. God does not take without giving. He does not remove without replacing. When He closes a door, it is because He has another one waiting to be opened. And sometimes the only way we can walk through that new door is if we first let go of what is behind us. If you spend all your time looking back, mourning what was lost, you will miss what God is trying to do in your present. You will miss the new friendships He is sending, the new opportunities He is preparing, and the new growth He is developing in you. And let us not forget, removal is often a sign of elevation. When God is preparing to take you higher, not everyone can come with you. There are people who are meant for your past, but not for your future. There are relationships that served a purpose in one season but have no place in the next. And if God is calling you higher, He will not allow anything or anyone to weigh you down. So when He removes, do not resist. Do not chase after what He has already let go of. Instead, surrender and trust that His plans are greater than anything you could imagine. Maybe you are still hurting over someone who left. Maybe you are struggling to understand why God allowed it to happen. I want to remind you of this. God sees the bigger picture. He knows what is best for you even when you cannot see it. And sometimes His greatest blessings come in the form of removal. That person you lost, they may have been holding you back from your purpose. That friend who betrayed you, they may have been an obstacle to your spiritual growth. That relationship that ended, it may have been preventing you from experiencing the love that God truly intended for you. When you look at the stories in the Bible, you see time and time again how God used separation for His purpose. Joseph was separated from his family, betrayed by his brothers, and thrown into slavery. But if he had never been removed from his home, he would have never risen to power in Egypt and saved his people from famine. Ruth lost her husband and left behind her old life. But through that loss, she was led to Boaz and became part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. Even Jesus Himself experienced separation. He had to leave His disciples, endure betrayal, and go to the cross alone. But through that painful removal, salvation was made available to all of us. So if God is removing someone from your life, do not see it as the end. See it as the beginning of something new. See it as a setup for something greater. Because when God takes something away, it is only because He is preparing to give you something better. And that a better may not come in the way you expect. It may not be a new relationship right away. It may not be an immediate answer. But if you remain faithful, if you trust His timing, you will one day look back and understand why everything had to happen the way it did. Right now, God is working behind the scenes in your life. He is aligning the right people, opening the right doors, and setting you up for the blessings He has prepared. But part of that process means removing the things that no longer serve you. It means pruning, refining, and shaping you for what is to come. And while it may feel painful now, while it may not make sense in the moment, I promise you this, one day you will see the purpose in it all. One day you will thank God for the people He removed. One day you will realize that what felt like loss was actually protection. So today I challenge you to shift your perspective. Instead of focusing on what is gone, focus on what is coming. Instead of asking, why did this happen? Ask, what is God preparing me for? Instead of mourning what was, start expecting what will be. Because the best is not behind you, it is ahead of you. And God is leading you there, step by step, even if it requires letting go along the way. Trust in Him, trust in His plan, and trust that every person who leaves was never meant to stay. Because when God removes, it is always for a reason. And that reason is always for your good. There comes a moment in every believer's life when they must decide. Will they trust God's plan even when it doesn't make sense? When God removes people from your life, it is not a punishment, nor is it an accident. It is a divine strategy. A strategy designed to refine you, to protect you, and to prepare you for something greater. But trusting this process is not always easy. The pain of separation can be overwhelming. The emptiness left behind can feel unbearable. And in those moments of loneliness, the enemy will try to whisper lies, telling you that you are abandoned, forgotten, or unworthy of love. But do not believe those lies, because God's removal is not rejection. It is redirection. Think about how much we struggle with letting go. We cling to relationships, friendships, and connections because they feel comfortable, familiar, or safe. Even when we know deep down that they are not healthy for us, we resist change. We pray for God's will, yet when He begins to remove the things that no longer serve us, we fight against Him. Why? Because we fear the unknown. We fear being alone. We fear stepping into something new without the people we thought would be with us forever. But here is the truth. When God takes someone out of your life, it is because they have served their purpose in your journey. Some people are meant to walk with you only for a season. And when that season is over, God moves them aside to make room for what's next. And what's next? And what's next? That is where faith comes in. Because often God removes before He replaces. He empties before He fills. He breaks before He rebuilds. When you are in that in-between place, when someone has been taken away, but you do not yet see what God is bringing, you must trust that His plan is still in motion. Just because you do not see the answer right now does not mean that God is not working behind the scenes. See? He is aligning the right people. He is preparing the right opportunities. He is shaping you into the person you need to be for the next chapter of your life. Look at the story of Abraham. God told him to leave his home, his family, and everything he knew to follow him into an unknown land. Abraham had to let go before he could step into God's promise. He had to walk away before he could walk into his destiny. And that is exactly what God calls us to do! To trust Him enough to release what we are holding onto so tightly, knowing that what He has for us is far greater than what we are leaving behind. Some of you are holding on to relationships that God has already ended. You are replaying the past, wondering if you could have done something differently. But if God removed them, it was not by mistake. If He closed that door, it was not an accident. Stop questioning what God has already answered. Stop looking back when He is calling you forward. Because every person who exits your life is making room for something, or someone better suited for your future. Now, this does not mean you should stop loving or caring for those who have been removed. Sometimes God takes people away for a season, only to bring them back later, when both of you are ready. Other times their removal is permanent, because their role in your story has ended. Either way, your job is not to force, chase, or manipulate. Your job is to trust. If you find yourself struggling with loss, ask God to reveal His purpose. Instead of asking, "Why did they leave?" ask, "What are you preparing me for, Lord?" Instead of focusing on what is missing, focus on what God is making room for. Pray for clarity. Pray for healing. Most importantly, pray for the strength to move forward without resentment, bitterness, or regret. Remember, God is not just a God of removal. He is a God of restoration. What He takes, He replaces. What He prunes, He causes to grow back stronger. What He strips away, He redeems. If He has allowed someone to leave your life, you can trust that He is setting you up for something greater. So let go of the past, release the pain, surrender the questions, and step boldly into the future God has prepared for you. Because His plans are never to harm you, but to give you hope, purpose, and a future beyond anything you could ever imagine.